This is a video which Boxing Beats and Rhymes did the other day. Grassroots boxing, how important were the prize fighter tourneys to Sky and Matchroom Boxing? I highly recommend you guys watch this, okay? I've been saying for the longest that whether you like it or hate it, whether you hate it or love it, Eddie Hearn had a very, very big hand in reviving British boxing. You know, all these people running around saying it's easy to become a star in British boxing because they've only got 2 sports in that country. Load of rubbish. I showed you guys in a video several weeks ago, I think it was from a Wikipedia article, a table from the early 2000s which showed the popularity of various different sports in Britain. I think boxing was something like number 7 or number 9. It was way down the list in terms of popular sports. Yeah, boxing was a niche sport in the UK when Eddie Hearn came onto the scene. It wasn't number 2 behind football. Today, it is number 2 behind football in the UK. Today, boxing is a massive sport in the United Kingdom. But that didn't happen by accident. That happened because of the efforts of Eddie Hearn and the fighters who he had signed to Matchroom Boxing, Cole Froch. Groves wasn't signed to him, but Groves played a big part because he had that rivalry with Froch. Anthony Joshua, obviously, to a lesser degree, people like Kell Brook. And Eddie Hearn understanding the market, understanding the fans. You see, prior to Eddie Hearn coming on the scene, you had Frank Warren, Frank Maloney, Dave Coldwell, and a bunch of promoters who were putting on shows on Sky. But none of them could revive British boxing. None of them were able to do it. It was dead. You know, British boxing was dead. There was obviously still grassroots support among the hardcore, among the working class Brits who would come out and support a local guy who everybody sees around town at a local small hall show. That was still going on, and there was still passion for that. But in terms of big events and big shows and all that kind of stuff, it was few and far between. You had David Haye occasionally fighting here and there, and he fought very rarely, you know, when he had a version of the heavyweight title. But for the most part, boxing was in the doldrums. It was in the dark ages. But when Eddie Hearn came on the scene with the prize fighter tournament, that's one of the things that Eddie Hearn used to build his brand and try and build enthusiasm for boxing again, was the prize fighter tournament, which people loved, by the way. And in this video by Boxing Beats and Rhymes, he quotes several fighters who were involved in prize fighter, and they talk about how beneficial prize fighter was for their careers, how they got paid way more in prize fighter than they would get paid normally for fighting on small hall shows. So that particular series of events, the prize fighter events, gave fighters so many opportunities, and it brought the fans back. Fans loved it. And from the success of prize fighter, because it was a massive success for Eddie Hearn and Matchroom and Sky, from the success of that, they then built and put on bigger events and better events, etc., etc. So Hearn understood what was going to work. He understood the market. He understood the fans. He understood that you can't be standoffish anymore in, you know, this era of social media, because that's how boxing promoters used to be. Frank Warren was not someone who was accessible. This is what a lot of young people don't understand. Frank Warren wasn't just a guy you could just walk up to, you know, on the street and start chatting to about boxing and pull your camera phone out and start having a, you know, interview with him and stuff like that. He wasn't someone who would stay behind for hours and hours at press conferences talking to just regular Joes. No, he would talk to the mainstream journalists from the major newspapers, but he wouldn't stay around for hours talking to all the average Joe who just had a YouTube channel. Frank Warren wasn't doing none of that. Frank Warren, when Eddie Hearn first came on the scene, criticized Eddie Hearn for being on Twitter. How about that? That's how short-sighted Frank Warren was. He couldn't see further than the end of his nose. He was stuck in the dark ages. And look, Frank Warren was a great promoter back in the days. Yeah, he put on great shows in the 1990s and in the 1980s. I remember him. I watched them. But Frank Warren's heyday is done. All right? Maybe he can have an Indian summer in his career, but that remains to be seen. Frank Warren's heyday was even longer ago than my heyday. And trust me, people, that was a long time ago. Frank Warren's heyday was like in the 90s. Since then, he lost his way and he didn't really understand the modern boxing fan or just the younger generation in general. He didn't get it. And that's why an opportunity was there for Eddie Hearn to get in the door. Because Eddie Hearn, being a younger person, understood the younger generation. He didn't have this high and mighty, sitting up on my perch and taking everything for granted attitude, which in my opinion, Frank Warren did have. Where he was taking his position for granted as being the number one promoter in the UK. Eddie Hearn came along and of course, born with a silver spoon in his mouth, already had the backing of his dad and money from, Matchroom Sport as a company. But he understood the fans. He understood what needed to happen. And he, along with his fighters, built British boxing back up to the position it's in now. They did that. Frank Warren didn't do that. He had every opportunity to. He couldn't do it. Frank Maloney couldn't do it. Dave Caldwell couldn't do it. David Hay, he was really only, interested in himself. He wasn't interested in building up any other fighters or building up British boxing in general. He was just interested in himself in his own career. It wasn't until Hearn came along that he was and people could say, oh, you're paid by Hearn and oh my God, you only no, I'm just talking about the truth. If you can't handle the truth, that's your problem. I'm not saying Eddie Hearn is perfect. I'm going to criticize Eddie Hearn just as I criticize, anybody else. But the point being, what am I supposed to do? Sit here and ignore the fact that Hearn and his fighters resurrected British boxing? Am I supposed to ignore that and pretend it didn't happen just to appease these idiots out here? No, I'm going to tell the truth. Back in the days, Frank Warren was the man. Back in the days, Frank Warren ran Eddie Hearn's dad, Barry, out of boxing. That's what he did. It got too hot in the kitchen for Barry Hearn, so he bailed out of boxing. And he went and concentrated on his other sports, darts and all that business. That's what he did. I'll tell the truth about that, no problem. I don't have an allegiance to any promoter. But right now, it's no longer Frank Warren. This ain't the 90s no more. This is the 2000s, 2019, and right now, it's all about Hearn. It's all about Hearn right now. He's the one who's been putting on all the big shows and doing all the good work, and he's built British boxing up to this point. It wasn't easy. Yeah, it took Hearn a long time to get to stadium fights and all that kind of business. It didn't happen overnight. Imagine just, remember back to all the prize fighters he was putting on. So bear that in mind. Boxing in the UK hasn't always been the number 2 sport. It's only been the number 2 sport for, the past couple years. Prior to that, it was way, way down the pecking order. And a lot of hard work had to be put in by Hearn and his fighters to get boxing to where it is now. But anyway, go watch this video by Boxing Beats and Rhymes. If you haven't seen it already, he explains it a lot better than me. And, it's very insightful hearing quotes from various different fighters who took part in the prize fighter tournament, so on and so forth. So yeah, definitely go check it out. Let me know how you feel. What's happening? I'm out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.